L24 Midnight News streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ramadan made a working visit to Mali, where he was received by the President of the Transition, Assimi Goïta. Zionist entity announced a series of sanctions in order to make the Palestinian Authority pay the price for its recent move at the United Nations. Amid the war in Ukraine, the European Union and NATO on Tuesday formally signed a joint declaration to strengthen partnership. And in American continent, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador welcomed his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for three-way talks known as the Three Amigos Summit. Hello again and welcome. I'm your host, Abdurrahim Kashor, and those were today's top stories. First, the UN Security Council will hold an open briefing session followed by close consultation on situation in West Africa and the Sahel region. It is expected that the Deputy Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for West Africa and the Sahel, the official in charge of the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel, Giovanni Bey, and the chairman of the Economic Community of West Africa States, ECOWAS, Omar Ali Touray, will give briefings on the subject. The UN Secretary General will present his proposal to renew the mandate of the United Nations Office for West Africa before its termination date on January 31st. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Mr. Ramadan Mamra, made a working visit to Mali, where he was received by the President of the Transition, Assimi Goïta, to whom he conveyed a message from the President Abdelmajid Tebboune. According to a statement by the Foreign Ministry, it is part of an ongoing endeavor to strengthen bilateral relations and cooperation between the two countries, as well as to accelerate the implementation of peace and reconciliation agreement stemming from Algeria's process, which is of paramount of importance in maintaining the unity, sovereignty, and stability of the Republic of Mali and the region as a whole. The committee is emerging from National Preparatory Conference of the 60th Congress of the Polisario Front presented on Tuesday the outcome of their work after 3 days of proceedings. The committees started their proceedings on Saturday in order to unify the perception and the visions on all issues discussed. The local conferences under the supervision of Preparatory Committee for the 60th Congress at the level of all extensions of branches of political organization. The head of the Arab Committee for Solidarity with Sahrawi People, Mahmoud Saleh, said Tuesday that hacking of his organization's page on social networking sites by Makhzen regime, which led to a closure, is considered as a dirty step. Mahmoud Saleh added that this is a cowardly, dirty step, indicates the extent of terror and fear that this regime suffers from terms of attitudes and free voices. A Moroccan appeals court in An-Nadour increased the sentences of 3 migrants by 6 months to 3 years over a deadly attempt crossing into the Spanish enclave of Melilla. The lawyer said on Monday around 2,000 people, many of them Sudanese, stormed the borderline on June 24 in a bid to reach Spanish territory across one of European Union's 2 land borders with Africa, where at least 23 people died. They are accused of participation in a criminal gang of secret immigration. illegal entry to Morocco and violence against local enforcement of officials. Documents published by the Spanish newspaper A Debate confirmed the involvement of Spanish Minister of Interior Fernando Gran Marlaska and a team of the Moroccan regime to cover up the merits of Melilla tragedy by preferring not to inform his prime minister of the details of the crime. The newspaper did not exclude the exploitation of the leaks by Pedro Sanchez in his election bidding to free himself of the case. Still with Morocco, the Moroccan Household Confidence Index fell during the fourth quarter of last year to its lowest level ever. The quarterly survey conducted by a High Commissioner for Planning showed that more than 83% of families acknowledged the deterioration of their standard of living, while more than half of the families acknowledged resulting of borrowing and the inability to purchase basic materials. To Tunisia, President Kais Saied met with Prime Minister Najla Bouden to discuss preparation for elections to the House of Representatives. According to a statement by Presidency of the Republic of Tunisia, the meeting addressed full willingness to organize the second session of elections of the members of House of People's Representatives and the general status of the country. Now to the Middle East, the sanctions imposed by Zionist entity on the Palestinian Authority are an attempt to push it to the brink of a financial collapse. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtaya said on Monday, denouncing a new war launched against Palestinian people. On Friday, the Zionist entity announced a series of sanctions in order to make the Palestinian Authority pay the price for its recent move to have the question of Zionist occupation of the Palestinian territories examined by the UN.
We consider these measures as a new war against the Palestinian people, their capabilities and their resources, and a war against national authority, their survival and their achievements. They target the entire Palestinian national project. These measures are illegitimate and illegal. They are unilateral measures that are not subject to any control procedure by any Palestinian or international party, and they are in violation of the agreements signed with us.
The occupation forces in Palestine detained 15 Palestinians in various parts of the occupied West Bank, including students. This happened during overnight raids where the detainees were taken into custody in different cities. In the same context, according to a local committee, occupation forces have destroyed 6 Palestinian structures in the West Bank. Still in Asia, the United Nations Security Council has unanimously agreed to allow cross-border aid to enter northwest Syria via the Turkish border after months. Miriam Zian tackled the story in this report.
The UN Security Council extended for 6 months the mechanism for delivering vital international assistance to millions of Syrians across borders. The UN Secretary-General described the humanitarian operations as vital for more than 4 million people in northwest Syria. Russia supported the resolution but said the decision was difficult and didn't mean there's a change in their approach to humanitarian assistance in Syria.
Поддержать принятие резолюции Our delegation made the difficult decision to support the adoption of a resolution. Renewing this, however, should not be perceived as a change of our principled position on the Syrian cross-border humanitarian mechanism. Needless to say, this resolution does not meet the aspirations of the Syrian people, who expect the Security Council not only to take effective humanitarian efforts, but also to respect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Syria, and do so not just in words, but in deeds.
Meanwhile, U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said although aid continues, much more can be done.
A 12-month extension is needed for the UN, and it is needed for our humanitarian partners and for recipients. So while it is important that this council came together today, let's be honest with ourselves. This resolution represents the bare minimum.
In a joint statement last week, the heads of UN organizations, including WHO, UNHCR and WFP, confirmed that the majority of the region's population is, I quote, women and children who need assistance to survive during the peak of winter and amid a cholera outbreak. Human rights activists and the humanitarian aid officials continue to demand a more permanent system, enabling aid to reach those in need, as 90% of the Syrian population lives below the poverty line. The only remaining artery for Syrians in the north is the opening of Bab el-Hawa border crossing with Turkey, but a 6-month extension is not enough and regarded alarming.
A member of the Popular Mobilization Forces was killed and 3 wounded in an attack by militants of the so-called Islamic State. A security official stated that the crowd forces had come up against the attack and engaged the militants, killing 1 crowd member and wounding 3 others differently. The European Union and NATO Tuesday formally signed a joint declaration to strengthen partnership amid war in Ukraine. The partnership aims at boosting security in the border region. The joint declaration is the 3rd between the organizations and the builds on the previous 2 declarations signed in 2016 and 2018, respectively.
We are determined to take the partnership between NATO and the European Union to the next level, to address in particular the growing geostrategic competition, resilience issues, and the protection of critical infrastructures, as well as emerging and disruptive technologies, space, the security implications of climate change, foreign interference, and information manipulation.
We know that we have to strengthen and now deepen this more than 20-year-old partnership, because Europe's security is challenged and it is under threat.
The small town of Solidar in eastern Ukraine has witnessed heavy escalation in the last days. Russia looks set to capture the salt mining town, with Kiev calling the situation there extremely difficult. More about Ukraine-Russia conflict in this report by Nabil Khazini.
A missile from here and another from there. The sound of fire is the loudest in Ukraine at a war where its battlefield knows a bloody escalation in the last days. Russian troops are now storming the city of Bakhmut, Russia's main military objective in the Donbas region. Kiev claims Russian troops are throwing a wave of missiles on the small town of Solidar as a way to envelop the strategic front line of Bakhmut.
The battle for Donbas continues, and although the occupiers have now concentrated their greatest efforts on Solidar, the result of this difficult and prolonged battle will be the liberation of our entire Donbas.
Like the land, like the sea, the scene is alike, a view of a preparation for a possible and potentially a different scenario of the war, which a Russian warship armed with hypersonic cruise weapons is bracing for at the Norwegian Sea. Moscow says it is the only way to guarantee its sovereignty.
We will continue to develop the nuclear triad and maintain its combat readiness, since the nuclear shield has been and remains the main guarantor of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of our state.
Despite Ukrainian forces were able to make dramatic gains in the early autumn of last year and show no sign of letting up the fight, the dynamic of war shifted again in the last months, with Russia gaining more lands.
Beijing criticized countries that have adopted COVID-19 measures against travelers coming from China entering their countries, urging them to take appropriate measures based on science and facts and to stop political manipulation and discriminatory measures. Beijing had threatened to take retaliatory measures after several countries imposed restrictions, including requiring negative COVID-19 tests for China travelers entering these countries.
I have clearly explained China's position, and we call once again on the countries concerned to ensure that their measures are based on facts, science, and are proportionate. They must not engage in political manipulation. The measures must not be discriminatory and must not affect normal cross-border travel, trade, and cooperation between peoples.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador welcomed U.S. President Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Mexico City National Palace for North America Leaders Summit on Tuesday. During this meeting, the countries will take steps to strengthen North America's semiconductor industry, the White House said on Tuesday, as the countries try to resolve a dispute over Mexico's energy policy that has angered investors. About 1,500 supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro have been detained after the Congress building, Presidential Palace, and Supreme Court were raided on Sunday. Hussein Burkan on What's Follow.
The second Sunday of 2023 was marked by a shocking event in the history of Brazil. Rioters invaded the Planalto Palace in Brazil. In the midst of so much confusion and losses, President of the Republic, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, decreed federal intervention to restore order in the federal district. Lula da Silva vowed to find those responsible for organizing the attack on the capital Brasilia and added that 1,500 people who took part in the attack are detained and will be held in jail until the investigation is finished.
They were shouting for a coup. This was the only thing one could hear, that they were shouting for a coup. This morning people were removed in the calmest way. There are almost 1,500 people in jail, and they are going to be in jail until we finish the investigation.
In turn, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris condemned the attack on Brazilian state institutions perpetrated by supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro. Harris called the Sunday invasion of Brazil's Congress, Supreme Court, and the Presidential Palace a clear and obvious attack on democratic process.
Well, let's be clear. This was an obvious and clear attack on a democratic process, and we condemn it, of course. I will also say that, as I've said to the Ambassador Bagley, that I'm very confident in her ability to represent the United States and to extend to President Lula all that we mean in terms of the work that we will do together as allies on some of the most important issues facing our world. So we are very much looking forward to her leadership and to working with President Lula.
Earlier on Monday, heavily armed police, some on horseback, lined up in front of a camp outside the army headquarters where hardline supporters of Bolsonaro had set up camp. The protesters were later cleared by soldiers. Sunday's attack was the worst attack on Brazil's state institutions since its return to democracy in the 1980s.
President Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Tuesday pledged their resolve to promote prosperity for people throughout the hemisphere as they opened wide-ranging talks about the fragile security situation in Haiti, North American trade, political unrest in Brazil, and more on sidelines of the North American Leaders Summit. Biden said focusing on supply chains was critical to both nations' security, adding that it would keep them from being so reliant on Asia.
And we're also in a situation where we're in the process at home, and you are as well. We've talked about it, strengthening our supply chains so that no one can arbitrarily hold us up or a pandemic in Asia cause us to not have access to critical elements that we need to do everything from build automobiles to so many other things. And together, I think we're achieving some really significant things. Today, we're going to discuss how we can try to help stabilize Haiti, how we can deal with migration, and at the same time bolster our national security. So I want to thank you again. You've always been there whenever I've called. You picked up the phone. I always think it's the same here.
As we talk about issues, whether it's Haiti, whether it's some of the challenges in South America, whether we talk about critical minerals and energy and how we're going to continue to move forward to create those efficient and resilient supply and value chains that we need, there's a lot that we're going to be able to do together.
To North America now, at least 17 people were killed and 68 others were injured in clashes with police in protests demanding early elections and release of jailed former President Pedro Castillo. The country's Human Rights Office said the latest casualties raised the death toll to 39 since the protests began in early December following the removal and the arrest of Castillo shortly after he tried to illegally dissolve Congress. Prime Minister Alberto Otarola said that close to 2,000 protesters carried out an organized and systematic attack against police authorities in Julaika Airport in Puno region.
Un ataque organizado, sistemático, de vandalismo y de organizaciones violentas.
Over 9,000 people approached the airport, and approximately 2,000 of these people started to attack police without mercy. An organized, systematic attack with vandalism and violent organizations against the rule of law and all the institutions in Puno.
And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup.
Gabonese head of state Ali Bongo Ondimba appointed Prime Minister Alain-Claude Billy Binze on Monday in replacement of Rose Christian Osuka-Raponda, who was appointed Vice President of the Republic, the presidency announced. Mr. Billy Binze, 55, has held several ministerial portfolios since 2006. While Ms. Osuka-Raponda was appointed Vice President, a position which has been vacant since 2019. She will be entrusted with assisting the head of state and has no interim role in the event of a power vacuum. Accordingly, the President of the Republic instructed the Prime Minister to form the new government. It's worth recalling that presidential and legislative elections are due to be held in the summer of 2023. Protest groups opposed to Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's administration held rallies in Mexico City ahead of the North American Leaders Summit. Demonstrators gathered outside the U.S. and Canadian embassies as López Obrador prepared to host President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Migration, both legal and illegal, and border security will be key topics for the talks to be held across Monday and Tuesday in the country. Thousands of people have been urged to flee their homes as more severe weather threatens California, pushing the death toll to 14 in recent storms. More rain has been pouring over California on Tuesday, threatening more flooding and disruption as part of the parade of storms that have forced thousands of people to evacuate and prompted dozens of rescues in recent days and left more than 14 dead in recent weeks. Roughly 34 million people across California, which is about 10% of the U.S. population, are under flood watches as the risk of mudslides also spreads to Los Angeles and San Diego areas. Prince Harry's controversial memoir, Spare, went on sale at bookstores in London on Tuesday, and eager readers headed to bookshops to get their copy with its intimate revelations about the British royal family. Harry's book has recorded a sales figure of 400,000 copies so far across hardback, ebook, and audio formats. Spare explores Harry's grief at the death of his mother, Lady Diana, in 1997, and his long simmering resentment at the role of Royal Spare, overshadowed by the heir, his older brother, Prince William.
Coming back to Algeria now, organizing committee held its first coordination meeting in Iran, Western Algeria, in the presence of a number of officials from the African Football Federation CAF. The meeting was attended by Vice Chairman of the Afro-Local Tournament Committee, Yassine Ben Hamza. Secretary General of the African Federation, Firon Monsengo, made an inspection visit to the new Iran Stadium in Hudvay on Tuesday, and he is due to hold a press conference today, Wednesday, at Nelson Mandela Stadium here in Algiers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And for now, good night.